Hi everyone, I'm Prasanna. You're listening to GydeBites, the vidcast that delivers big L&D insights in small bites. I'm your host today. I'm CEO of a company called Gyde. It's a Gen AI powered digital adoption platform. Today's episode is all about reshaping the future of work with AI. And our guest today is Toby Newman. He's a senior L&D consultant at CH Robinson. He brings over 20 years of experience in designing innovative L&D programs. Toby excels at using AI and technology to create engaging, future-ready learning experiences. He's passionate about employee well-being, continuous learning, and today he is here to help us navigate the evolving world of learning. Welcome, Toby.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it sounds a lot. when your bio is read back to you, I'm like, oh, really? Have I done all that? It's great to be here. Looking forward to this.
Thank you so much, Toby. So let's jump right in. Toby, so how is AI personalizing learning for employee today? Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive topic. And I think if I was to boil it down to two areas, there is the employee side, what they can control, and then from the L&D side in terms of what they control. So, we were actually having a discussion yesterday, about, employees and using, like ChatGPT or Bing or, all the different things out there. And one of the conversations was that, AI is a challenge and a risk to managers because, as an employee, if your manager is not necessarily present or they're not as switched on in inverted commas as the employee would like them to be, then they'll just turn to their colleague, ChatGPT or the other platforms and get the answers. Kind of everything from how do I do this to how do I do that to help me to present this or give me feedback on this document. And, it's endless from what an individual can do. So the risk is quite big for the company. But the benefits for the employee is boundless for me. And then from the L&D side, it's the same thing. It's that personally, I use it. God, I use it more than anything else. I probably talk to it more than my wife, or my colleague, because I'm constantly kind of like, oh, I've got this. And I kind of put a personality on it. It's like, oh, hey, I've got this and I've got this. I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And it will come back with kind of interesting suggestions. Sometimes things I haven't thought of. Sometimes it's kind of reconfirming what I already thought. And obviously now with like, DALL-E, I think is the right way of saying it with ChatGPT, you've got images. And I know there's loads of platforms out there that you can now do videos and auto transcribe. And God, I use it even for Adobe to not alter, but kind of amend pictures. So if I want to like find a picture on, say, Adobe stock, and I go, yeah, but I'd really like the image to be over this side rather than over that side. In the past, when we're creating content, you're like, tough, you deal with it. Now you're like, done. And you wouldn't see any difference. So it's opening. Again, I've heard kind of people say, yeah, but it's making you lazy. And I'm like, it's completely opposite. It is making me more engaged. It is making me more curious, and it is giving me a wider sense of what's going on. And particularly the thing I love about it from an L&D perspective is it allows you to take two topics that are relatively unconnected, throw them in there, and it will find a connection for you. And for me, that's really important in storytelling when you've got a whole kind of project that you're trying to go through and you want to get a story through it and kind of add that je ne sais quoi, kind of whatever it is. ChatGPT will allow you to say, well, from here, you can go to here, to go to here, to go to here. And here is the way through it. And then I love my analogies. So then I'll just kind of put it and say, right, give me an analogy that allows all of this together. Some of them are silly. Some of them are stupid, but I'm like, it's the way I think of it is it's like an extremely clever intern. So, an intern that's got all the knowledge of, university, but they're just a bit rough around the edges, so to say. You can obviously be a lot ruder to a chat GDP than you can to an intern. At least, you should be, well, you should not be rude to an intern. But yeah, it's a resource that's, I actually get really frustrated when not enough people use it, because it's crazy how good it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's right in a way. We have been using it so much so that it's like a real assistant, right? For us, it becomes a helping guide, helping hand for everyone. So you mentioned briefly about the challenges that organizations face. So do you want to double click on that? About the challenges that organizations are facing because the employees are using all these tools and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious one is the privacy security. So a lot of companies are buying, let's call it the enterprise version of ChatGPT, Bing, or whatever. I know Microsoft offer the ability that if you take their Microsoft package, like the Copilot, then you
Copilot.
get a corporate version of it. So for those that aren't kind of too familiar, the basic way I explain it is that when you enter stuff into the ChatGPT, Bing, whatever it is, it will then throw that off into the server and start identifying and analyzing it, and then send it back. And then because it's in the server, it's learning from that. It's kind of
Yeah,
figuring out what it is, and it's kind of, so it's not publicly available. It's not like you've just put it on Google, but people can find that information if they so wish. So what the kind of enterprise solutions do is they put up basically like a guardrail in between, so that you can send stuff over to the server, but it will basically not necessarily filter out the confidential stuff, but it will tell the system, do not learn from this. You can go and find information on it, but don't learn from it. And don't store it in your server, kind of like move it immediately. Now, I know I'm not a techie, and I know there's probably people like yourself that will kind of go, well, this is exactly how it works and stuff. But for me, that's kind of how I was reassured to say that from a company perspective, you can find safe ways to use it. And like I said at the start, the biggest challenge is that we don't double down on it and we don't look into it. I know a lot of companies like my own are investing in ways of automating things, using it again, not replacing employees, but assisting them. One of the things I've always said, and I've heard it from other people as well, is that AI will not replace your job, at least not for a long time, but it will. But somebody using AI 100% will replace you. That's an absolute guarantee. Now, that may sound a bit kind of like too extreme. The way I think of it is that, let's say you're going for a job interview or you're going for a promotion, and you've got two people of relatively, kind of equal. Even one person is a bit better. But if I'm using ChatGPT and going into that promotion or that job interview, I can prep like it's on steroids. So I can put in my CV, I can put in the job description and say, write me a covering letter that makes sure I cover all these points. Please go off into the internet and go and find everything you can about this company. What are their values? What's their culture like? Go into places like Glassdoor and give me all the information and give me bullet points and talking points based on all that. And I'm like, boom, I've got everything that would have taken me days and days and days. And so I go into that. I may be stupider or not as good as the other person, but I'm going to get that job because according to the employer, should I say, I am more prepared. I'm a better, fit, so to speak. So yeah, they're not going to replace you there and then, but you will get phased out. And I always says that the train has already left the station on this. It's not a case of like, oh, I wonder if I should use it. And no, it's kind of almost not too late, but the train has already left the station. You've got to kind of catch up to it because, the rate of technology is going, it's really going to increase. And I think from a company's perspective, apart from that side of things and that reassurance, again, they can automate things. They can scale things, even just silly things like communication. Not saying that we don't need a marketing team, or a corporate team, but I know a lot of corporate marketing teams that actively use ChatGDP or Bing or any other version to make sure that their communication is as good as it can be. And it's just silly things like that as a company, you can embrace ChatGDP and Bing to be able to really kind of engage in your employees.
Sure. That's interesting, Toby. I mean, you mentioned about two candidates, one using AI tools and another not using AI tools. So this sort of leads to our next question. So how do we ensure we are using AI in an ethical way in L&D or learning and development? What are your thoughts on that?
I suppose it depends what you mean by ethical, because I think it's blurred, if I'm being honest at the moment. Now, so let me ask you back. What's your definition of ethical?
I would in a way say that it is first and foremost it's a legal use of AI.
Yeah.
That's very important. So we are sort of bounded by these rule of law, rule of land kind of thing. And another is we are not hurting anyone else. I believe by using these tools. So
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of interesting ways to take it. I think the one thing that isn't really talked about is the energy consumption. I don't know the exact details, but I know that the computer farms or the server farms use immense amounts of energy to
yeah,
generate these things, and obviously that's getting better over time with improved technology. But I do know that there is a ecological, like that kind of ethical dilemma to say that these farms are using immense amounts of water and energy and electricity and burning fossil fuels to pay for that electricity. So you got that side of things. Okay. But if we kind of skip over that piece, it's that weird thing. Like I saw on the internet this when this whole argument of should you use ChatGPT to cheat, in a sense, what a lot of
yeah,
people call
yeah.
it, that kind of ethical side. Somebody shared, I think it was on LinkedIn or somewhere, for me, a very funny image that in the 1970s, it showed maths teachers protesting outside schools at the use of calculators, saying it was cheating to use a calculator in maths exams. And your reaction is like kind of what pretty much everybody else is like, what? It's like, that's crazy. And that's where we are at the moment. You've got people. My challenge is the people that say, oh, ChatGPT is cheating on exams. It's like, but then you're just being lazy in your exams. What ChatGPT is forcing you to do is to rethink how you should be doing it. Because, I mean, I've got a daughter and I can't even imagine the kind of world she's only 6 at the moment. I can't imagine the world she's going to come into when she gets to kind of work age. And for me, it's never been a case that we should limit things like this whole, don't use your phones in schools and stuff. Obviously there's, cyberbullying and that kind of thing, but we should be embracing it. So phones should be used. And I've seen lots of very good examples where phones are used to actively educate people in school. So like there'll be Google searching stuff and images while they're as part of the lesson. And I think ChatGPT is the same, is that if you're doing tests and stuff, it shouldn't be, for example, I don't know, like if you're doing a history lesson or a history test, it shouldn't just be what was this date, what was that date, because we're past that. You can Google it, you can now ChatGPT it, and it will give you everything. What you should be able to do is to analyze it as a human to say, what are the impacts and what are your thoughts? How do you articulate what your thoughts are about what ChatGPT is saying versus what is known in history? And is ChatGPT right? So it's almost like using your analytical brain to question the robot, so to speak, and then your emotional intelligence to add to it. That is then how we can kind of not bypass the ethical, but move beyond this kind of ethical of cheating. Legal stuff, I think you should always be careful about what you put into ChatGPT, just the same as we've been doing it for a whole generation on the internet.
That's
Like
true.
you don't put personal stuff unless you want to be personal stuff on the internet. And so it's the same with ChatGPT. If you don't want it to know things, then don't put it in there. There are ways and means you can get around it rather than saying, I'm Toby and I'm this and I'm this and this. Go. You can say, imagine you're a person of a certain age with this kind of background. Go. So you can kind of be creative and get around it that way.
Yeah. That's an interesting take, Toby. So another important question that has been arising, or I mean, everyone I talk to is like, is AI going to take away jobs and all that? But from my perspective, more important thing to sort of grasp over or to ponder over is how we can bridge the gaps. So today there is always a talk about employability and the skill gaps and all that.
Yeah.
How do you see we identifying and bridging those skill gaps using AI?
So, I mean, it's a big question and a worry for a lot of people at the moment. I think so. I've had a discussion similar to this with other people in L&D. So, the question around change, and I've always used the example of cars. So, back in 1905 and stuff, I think Henry Ford famously said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would just want faster horses, rather than cars. So people didn't want cars. They were perfectly happy with their horses. And then when cars come along, there was this whole big furore about, well, what's going to happen to the blacksmiths? Well, they became engineers. What's going to happen to, X, Y, and Z and stuff? And it all, we didn't all die and people survived. Now, the pushback to that I've had, which I validate, is that was a gradual change over, let's say, decades, whereas the speed of change at the moment is actually too fast for us to adapt. Yeah. So it's not like we can say, right, now everybody needs to be prompt engineers, because by the time we've actually studied to be prompt engineers, it's kind of the technology's moved on again. So that is an issue. I think if I boil it down to individuals and kind of where we are as humans and skills, is that, and it's what I've been teaching recently, is we need to focus away from technical skills, much more around self-awareness, emotional intelligence, values, and all those kind of aspects of what makes you you, and personality and behavior and all those things. If you can kind of get better at those, and things like, not so change management training and stuff, but understanding the importance of change rather than kind of, running away from it. I think that will set us up for anything that comes up, in the future. And for me, it is, I had an interesting conversation with a colleague yesterday, and they talk about problems. And I said, you shouldn't talk about problems. You should talk about challenges, because a problem is an automatic thing in your head to say problem equals negative. So you automatically go negative. Whereas if you think of it as a challenge, then you're automatically thinking positive. So I think there's a lot to be said around growth mindset, learning mindset, understanding our human condition, the importance of sharing our knowledge, those kind of things, those kind of skills, rather than, but as well as investing in the skills of prompt engineering. I'm not saying you go off and get a degree in prompt engineering, but you could spend 5-10 minutes and easily get to grips with how to create the best prompts, how to have a conversation, because it's never about the first prompt. It's always about the conversation that you have with it, and just diving in and using it and seeing what it comes up and thinking, what can I use this for, rather than this is going to destroy it.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense.
Because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, unless something very, very, very serious happens, this is here to stay.
Yeah. And the amount of money that has been going into stuff
and
to
money talks,
sort of develop. So it's here to stay for sure. That kind of brings us to our last question. So I know you mentioned that the speed of change is like very fast, but what sort of future trends you see in AI for workforce development or for L&D? in general? Maybe not like 10 years down the line, but maybe
Yeah,
in
that's
like
yeah.
uh,
Well, I think
in like two,
for
3 years time frame.
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, because if you go too far ahead, then it's just ridiculous. Because it's the
Yeah,
speed
yeah,
of change. But for me, if I'm being honest, I don't like trends. The reason why I don't like trends is it kind of it sets up a false sense of understanding about learning and development, because everybody, I mean, I'm not going to say everybody's different because that's obvious, but every company is different. Every learning and development department needs different things, is in different places of their learning and all that kind of stuff. And I honestly think it's not necessarily dangerous, but I think it's not right for us to talk about trends, because it then causes FOMO, the fear of missing out.
yeah.
And then what you'll end up doing is doing the thing we're trying to stop, which is companies thinking the trend is LXP or the trend is chatbots. Oh, I got to go and get one. And then they get one and they realize they don't need it or it's useless or whatever. And then you get to and then it's the same old thing going round and round saying, oh, why are they doing it? It's like, well, we're the problem. We're the ones that say, oh, the trends are this and the trends are that, because we're setting them up to fail. So in the kind of the short answer is there isn't any trends. But I think, if you look at just technology, I think as an industry, we need to start moving away from traditional concepts like LMSs and start to think about your ecosystem as a whole and how to engage in your employees. So it's not necessarily going, all right, we don't need that anymore, let's rip it up and start again. But it's things you can add to it. And I think things like chatbots. There's a lovely, I'd call him a friend, a very good contact of mine that runs a company called um, Mobile Coach. Jesus. Oh, sorry for swearing. My mind just went completely blank. Mobile Coach. Sorry, Vince, if you're watching. And things like that. It's like kind of, you can add layers over to your existing platforms and existing stuff. So it's not ripping it up and starting again. It's just adding little things. And I think what I would recommend is for learning and development teams to be open-minded to different tech and apps and stuff. Not to double down on them and to go, right, this is going to be our new thing, but just to set up little trials. Just spend some time to invest in trials, pilots, little things, just to see how can we get the engagement and how can we get people developing themselves. Because like if we said, go back to what we said at the start, that individuals will be using these things and we need to invest our time to develop them as human beings, to understand themselves, to self-develop, because we just physically cannot keep up with the pace anymore. That's a physical impossibility. So we can use tech to do that. I've always said there's only two reasons you need tech: to scale or to automate. That's the only two reasons you'd have tech. You should already have a challenge, or you should already be doing something. Think, oh, to give you an example, we're running a workshop at the moment where, do the workshop, great. Everybody's kind of enjoying it, very motivated and all that kind of stuff. When they leave and it's like, okay, now what? So, what I'm doing manually, sending out reminders to every single group every 2 weeks on, hey, did you think about this? I hope you're still looking at this platform. Have a think about this. So can you imagine I've got 16 different groups and, all running so my calendar is like crazy, but I think it's important to keep up that engagement. So for me, getting a tool that can automate it like that is a no-brainer. So it's not necessarily that's a trend, but it's more just looking at your own situation and think, is there a way that I can automate this process? Is there a way that I can scale what I'm doing? And then start looking at potential options.
Yeah. It was fantastic, Toby. I mean, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
And thank you to our audience as well for tuning in to GydeBites. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your colleagues, and until next time, keep learning. Thank you so much again. Have a nice one. Bye bye.